Anyone with plans for summer hiking or camping will want to hear this next story. Milder winters brought on by climate change are fueling an explosion in tick populations. That's causing an increase in tick-borne illnesses. And now Ontario says it's going to start formally tracking 3 of those illnesses. For more on this, we're joined now by Dr. Christopher Labos. He's, of course, an epidemiologist and cardiologist and joins us from Montreal this morning. Good morning, Dr. Labos. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So there are 3 different illnesses here that we want to talk about. I'm probably not even going to attempt to say them. They're a bit of a mouthful, the 3 of them. But if you can, talk to us a little bit about these 3 and why officials, why health experts, of course, are so concerned about them.
Okay, so the 3 diseases in question are anaplasmosis, babesiosis, and Powassan virus. And these are all tick-borne illnesses, so they're basically transmitted to humans via ticks rather than through mosquitoes or some other vector. And so they are very different. They cause somewhat different diseases, and they are treated differently. They all tend to be febrile illnesses, so they all cause very high fevers, but they can also affect the body system in different ways. So anaplasmosis, what you typically see is a low white cell count and low platelets. That's sort of the classical sign that you would see on blood testing, whereas with babesiosis, it's really the red blood cells that get infected. It causes a hemolytic anemia that causes the red blood cells to be infected and burst. So, not entirely dissimilar from what you would see with other hemolytic anemias. And Powassan virus is probably the rarer of the 3, but it's a little bit different, as the name implies. It's a virus, so it can't be treated with antibiotics the way the other 2 would be. The main reason why we're talking about these things now, because they are very rare, relatively speaking. But the reason we're talking about it is that if you were to ask me the question is like, well, how many people have been infected with this in Canada over the past 10 years? We don't really have a very good answer to that because these are not reportable diseases. And so one of the reasons to declare something a reportable disease is so that when the case is diagnosed, the information is sent to a database so that we have these types of statistics so that we can track it and see how common is it getting more common, and is this something we need to worry about? Because the concern is that as the winters get more mild, as ticks are able to survive Canadian winters, whereas previously they couldn't, we could start to see more and more of these diseases starting to spread.
And one of these warnings, of course, is actually coming from Ontario's top doctor, the medical officer of health. He's saying that he expects to see more of this going forward as the climate, of course, continues to warm. How hard is it for doctors to diagnose this if a patient has come into contact with one of these illnesses?
Well, it can be very difficult, and part of the problem is that a lot of people might have mild illnesses and never seek medical attention, and that is part of the problem. As with all diseases, we always talk about and we always mention the more severe cases, but there's always a spectrum of disease, and for a lot of these things, a lot of cases might be mild or even asymptomatic, and the patients may not even know. They may not remember when they went hiking a week ago, because the incubation period can sometimes be days, perhaps up to a week in some of these cases. So if you don't go and look for these things, you're not going to find them. And part of the other reason to sort of raise awareness about these things, especially in the medical community, is for people to think about this, because we do have to think about tick-borne illnesses, whereas we probably didn't have to think about them all that much 20 years ago. And so specifically going and testing for them, looking in patients' blood, doing blood smears to look for these parasites, because you really do have to look for them in the blood smears to look at the parasite count to identify them. That takes a conscious act. You have to specifically order that diagnostic test to go looking for it. And if you don't think about something, you're never going to diagnose it.
And Dr. Labos, we don't have a ton of time left here, but how should people be protecting themselves?
If you're going to go out into the woods and hiking, it's really wear long clothing, long sleeves, long pants, and spraying yourself with DEET, insect repellent. That's what's going to prevent the tick from latching onto you. Remember, the tick does actually have to latch onto you. So if you've covered up your skin, the tick can't get there, and the DEET repellent is going to go a long way to preventing it from actually getting you in the first place. Those are very simple things, but they're very, very basic things, and they make a difference, especially when you're going out into the wooded areas, especially southern wooded areas near the U.S. border where there are more ticks in general.
Sometimes simple advice is the best advice. Dr. Labos, thank you for this as always. We do appreciate it.
My pleasure. You take care.